Hello, this is Kodak Slack of the Indy 500 here with DJ Rick Wrigley, and we're going to be doing an interview and talking about Rick's college radio experience and just radio experience overall. So, Rick, do you want to start off by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm an alumni DJ here at WSC. Unfortunately, this semester we're not on the air because alumni can't get into the studios because of the pandemic. But hopefully, maybe in January we'll be back. I'm retired in my regular life and sort of getting back to my first love, which was radio. And I got my start in radio on October 13th, 1963 at WSC-AM back in the days. That's how far back that was. We were at 7:30 on the dial, and we were playing at the time what's called good music. And if you remember Good Morning Vietnam, the kind of music they were playing in this radio station before Adrian Cronauer came along, that's what we were playing back in those days. I was, me and another guy were sort of the, if you will, the Adrian Cronauers of WSC because we introduced rock and roll in a thing called the Dawn Patrol Show in 1964. And it was on between 6 and 8 every morning. I did 3 shows and the other guy did 2 shows a week.
Wow, that's a lot.
That was a lot. And so 2 hours every other day was, but that kind of got me ready for my career in radio because when I left the university and WSC, I went over to WCOS here in Columbia. WCOS was an AM station, of course, back in those days. There still is a WCOS AM, but the AM is not what it used to be. But back then, WCOS AM was the #1 rocker in town. And we had a whole bunch of guys over there. We just wild and crazy guys. So, and then from there, I went on to WIS television. I worked in on both sides of the camera over there, but mostly behind the scenes in the engineering department. I was back in school at USC in the engineering department. I have my degree in electrical engineering. So that was back. I was actually working in the field I was going to be training for at the same time. Then I went over to South Carolina Educational Television for 12 years. And then from there, went on to a couple other jobs in state government. Running the state website was one of the things I did. And one of the things we did also there before that was when I was in the Department of, it was called Land Resources. Back in the day, they got merged into the Department of Natural Resources with, actually I said Land Resources, but that's not right. It was the Water Resources. We got merged into the Department of Natural Resources with Water Resources. But at that point, I was building the very first site in the state of South Carolina, in state government, that is.
Wow.
So eventually I wound up taking over the state government's website and ran it from 1997 through 2000.
Oh, wow.
Then I went off to the private sector for a while. And then in 2007, I attended a WSC alumni meeting and I ran into DJ Gamecock there, who's another alumni. And he said, you need to get right back into radio. And he got me involved with an online radio station. And then since then, I've been on several online radio stations, still own one of my own. And I'm on several other stations around the world. At this point, because I don't get to go on live radio anymore, I am doing the afternoon drive show on a little radio station out in McMinnville, Oregon. And we're able to do that through magic called voice tracking and the internet. So that's about where I am now.
Did you say that you own your own radio station?
I do. It's an online station. Our Generation Radio is where I've moved the Backbeat show over to on Monday mornings. We're over there right now during the pandemic. That's ourgenerationradio.com. There's your shameless plug for you right there.
That's awesome. Do you have other DJs kind of broadcasting on Our Generation Radio too?
I do. As a matter of fact, one of those DJs is a fellow by the name of Mark Dawson, who is the lead singer and bass player for the old group called the Grassroots. You might remember.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, they had a lot of hits way back in the late 60s and early 70s. The original band has all died out now, but before the band died out, they picked their successors, and Mark was picked to be the bass player and lead singer. So he's kind of a cool guy. It's kind of fun to have him on. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were in school, you said that you were there when it was WUSC-AM. Were you there for all 4 years of your undergrad?
Actually, I left school in '65 because of the opportunity at WCOS.
Mm.
Actually, the fall semester of '65, I was still at school. That was my last semester uh, at the university. And then, but I took a part-time job at WCOS, which became a full-time job. And I realized I couldn't do the all-night show over WCOS and be any kind of a student during the day. So I dropped out of school for a while, came back to school while I was working at WIS television, and worked from then on to part-time to finish my college degree.
Gotcha. Well, I'm happy that you're back at WSC now.
I'm enjoying it. I'm loving
Yeah.
giving back to the place that got me started all those years ago.
Yeah, it must be like surreal, kind of like coming back into that environment. Was the station in Russell House when you were a DJ?
It was, as a matter of fact, at the time I was there, the west wing of Russell House ended at the door that goes in the hallway. There's a big door or archway, and you go from that. You're going from the old wing to the new wing as you head out toward the west side of the building. That was the end of the hall back in the days, and WSC is about where the orientation office is now in the lobby.
Okay.
So funny thing is, at the time I was there, that was the second floor. It is now the third floor.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is when they built the extension to WSC or to the Russell House, they also built the basement underneath what was then the post office.
Mm.
And that's where the post office is now. That became the ground floor. Ground floor became one became two, and two became three. And that's how we moved from the second floor to the third floor by just going down the hall.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty strange, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. I can't even imagine. Like, I know that they've been like talking about kind of either redoing Russell House or like tearing it down and building another one, but like I can't even imagine in like 30 years going back in there and like seeing all the changes that is going to happen with the radio station and stuff. It's going to be crazy.
Well, what's really strange for me is to get on that elevator in the lobby of Russell House and ride it up to the third floor and realize I've been riding that same elevator for over 50 years.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Lots of elevator rides up there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. So you've obviously been in radio for a very long time. So what has kept you in radio?
When I was a kid growing up in Jacksonville, Florida, I was under the pattern, if you will, of two iconic radio stations, AM rock radio stations. WPDQ was there first. They were at 600 on the dial, and they had a 5,000 watt signal that covered most of North Florida and into the middle of Georgia. But then in 1958, a new station came on the air as a daytimer back in those days. That was WAPE, and that is one of the iconic radio stations in the Southeast. You can always hear their big 8 call. It was the end of a song by Nervous Norvis called 8 Call. And they kind of lit my fire for, wanting to be a DJ. And so when I came to the university, I had no idea WSC existed. Mm-hmm. But then I found out later on when I ran into Steve Workowski, who was at the time the general manager of WUSC. He was on the same hall over in the old honeycomb dorms that I was in. And he said, you got to come over and see the station. And I got hooked. And ever since then, I was really hooked. You might remember in 1963, I did my first show on October 13th. But in November, John F. Kennedy was shot.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that kind of brought to me the immediacy of radio and the media. When he was shot, I first heard about it. I was coming back across campus and walking across Davis Field, which was a wide open field back then. There was no reflecting pond in front of the undergraduate library.
Wow.
And I was walking back across the field from campus back toward my dorm, and I heard somebody yell out Preston dorm. They yelled, "They killed President Kennedy." And I was like, what? I had no idea. That was the first I had had any inclination that had happened. So I immediately turned around and walked up the big ramp up into the Russell House and went into the station and looked at the teletype machine. And sure enough, the bells were going off. And we had 3 teletype there, UPI, AP, and a weather teletype. Both the UPI and AP were just going crazy. Mm. And I was sitting there, I was just mesmerized. And I was joined by a bunch of other people from the station. And we were trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to react to this as a station? And what we wound up doing was not doing regular programming, but playing somber music with announcements about what was going on. And we did that for the entire period between the assassination and his burial the following Monday.
Oh, wow.
And I guess it was just that experience that really kind of cemented in my mind that there is something to this career in broadcasting. And that's how I got hooked in the business and wound up staying with it all that time.
Yeah, that definitely shows that that's kind of one of the moments that have kept you with radio, because you still like remember specifically like where you were, what you did, and everything.
Yeah, it's one of those things, just like 9/11 is to the latest generation. You remember where you were at the point you heard about that.
Right.
Yeah. So.
So like you kind of already went over what radio was like when you first started. Did you guys do the 24/7 broadcasting, or how was your schedule?
Actually, WSC was a very short schedule. We went on the air at 4:30 in the afternoon and went off the air at 1 in the morning. And part of that was the Russell House availability. We didn't have keys except for the executive staff. So executive had to be there to open up the station. So when I got to be an executive, I wound up having a key and I was able to go into the station. But the Russell House actually closed and we had to vacate by 11 o'clock. So their early evening guy who worked from 8 until 10 would be 8 till 11. I'm sorry. No, we had 7 to 9 and 8 and 9 till 11. That's right. So the guy just before 11 o'clock would load up this big old reel tape. If you see behind me here, you see this machine. It's a big size of the tape that I'm pointing to right now. That would hold 2 hours of a show. So the baby DJs, rather than getting them on the air, we would put them in the production studio and have them record shows onto this tape, and then we would play them back starting at 11 o'clock. So the 11 o'clock announcer would load the tape and start it, and then he'd leave. Now, what happened is when the rocker arm of that tape fell, when the tape wound out, it would turn off the transmitter.
Oh, wow.
So WSC was carrier current back in those days, so we didn't have transmitter readings like everybody else in the world did. So we were able to do that kind of thing and create a sort of automated system.
That's really cool.
That way.
What are some of your favorite memories from your time in radio, either with WSC or like any of the other radio stations that you've mentioned?
Well, I'm sure you can probably relate to this. One of my favorite memories is doing that very first show. Sitting there opening up that microphone and wondering what was going to come out.
I relate to that, yeah.
I am thankful to the Lord and stars above that there is no recording of that show in existence anymore. One thing, however, I will say, I've never done a perfect radio show, and I hope I never do.
Yep.
You know, that's just, to me, that's what radio is about. That live radio, the DJ putting his life on the line, so to speak, and just out there doing his thing or her thing. There's nothing like listening to a DJ that knows what he's doing, putting together a radio show. And that's one reason I'm so impressed with a lot of you guys over at WSC these days, because you really are getting it together. All right, a favorite event. Well, there's a couple. In 1966, I was doing the all-night show over at WCOS, and the boss, who his name was Woody Windy, walked into the production control room with this guy with a beard and kind of scraggly-looking guy, and he motioned for me to come over and walk in and talk with him. And he introduced me. It was Sam the Sham of Sam and the Sham and the Pharaohs. I don't know if you ever heard of that group, but they were a garage band from the mid-'60s, and they had songs like Wooly Bully and Little Red Riding Hood and lots of big songs that people of my generation would recognize at a drop of a hat.
Right.
So what we did, Sam was doing a show at the Township Auditorium, and what we did was we arranged for him to come back in the studios, and we did a live show together, Sam and I, and he was the mystery guest. And the whole idea was to have him introduce some songs and then have the audience call in on the telephone and try to guess who that was.
That's a cool.
They finally got it when he introduced Wooly Bully.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Another interesting event, again at WCOS, was when I was out at the Doug Brooms Drive-In. We had a little radio booth on the grounds right next to First Row Teletrays at the location that was on Two Notch Road, not the location of Main and Confederate, which most people remember, But for a while, he was highlighting his second location at Two Notch Road. So we were doing the show out there. So I'm sitting there. It's early 1968, and I'm spinning record. And in this booth with 3 4x8 glass windows on the front side and either side. And the back wall has a door and an air conditioning unit, so I can't see out behind me. I look up, and there's this guy riding by on a motorcycle wearing a Hell's Angels jacket, the German World War I helmet with a spike on top, and leathers. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And and I hear him go around behind me on the right. And the next thing I know, he's coming back. He's not alone. There are 2 of them now, and they're both of them give me the eye as they ride by. And then there were 4, and then there were 8. Finally, there's a gang of about 30 or so riding around, and I'll look over at the manager of the restaurant who's in the building next to me. He's on the phone to the cops because he doesn't know what's going on. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe we better get the cops out here real soon. But anyhow, finally they came around one time. All of them give me the eye, and they pull around. And I hear them come up behind me where my car's parked. And I'm saying, uh-oh. I hear all those hogs just shut down. It's dead silence out there. I just started a new record when I heard bang, 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 bang on the door. And I thought, uh-oh, I guess I better go face the music and see what they're up to. And I walk up and I open up the door, and there they are in all their radiant glory with the helmet and the leathers and the jacket and everything. The leader, he looks at me and he hands me a napkin that's smudged with mustard and ketchup, and scribbled on it is something. He says, play this soon. I said, next. Went back and opened up. Now, you're not going to believe this. The name of the song was Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf. That's what they wanted to hear. Wow. Which is all about
oh, wow.
the writing day. So that was kind of a crazy event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine being in that situation. That's funny.
Well, that's some of the advantages and disadvantages of doing a remote show. You really have to think these days more than we did back then about security. The day Martin Luther King was shot, he was shot just before I went on the air. He was, of course, in Memphis, and we were at a Lorraine Hotel, if I remember, motel, if I were. And I was just going on the air on WCOS. Mike Rass was my news guy. He was back in the studio reading the news, and I heard in the 8:30 newscast that he had been shot and was in the hospital. And then I heard in the 9 o'clock newscast that he'd actually passed away.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my. And I noticed, this is, of course, well before cell phones were a thing. Even any kind of mobile phone was a thing. Mm-hmm. I noticed all the young ladies that were in the cars outside, leaving the cars and calling somebody on their phone. I figured they were probably calling their parents. And their parents were saying, get home now, because we don't know what's going to happen. It was a scary time.
Right.
So pretty soon, about maybe 9:30, it was me and the restaurant staff, and that was it. The place was completely emptied. The manager came out at around 10:30 and said, we're going to shut down early. And I said, well, I got to stay here because there's no way for me to get back to the station because we don't have a DJ back at the station right now. We just have our news guy. And he said, well, that's fine with us. Just go ahead and do that. So next thing I realized, that the only light besides the street lights and the traffic lights on in the entire street, all of Two Notch Road and all of Beltline that I could see was my own light, the fluorescent lights of my booth. And I really felt exposed. But I got to tell you, as scary as that time was, nothing happened here in Columbia. We went into curfew, but nothing happened in Columbia. So I was so proud of the way our city reacted to that event. It was such a inspiring event, but although a very, very sad one at the same time.
Right. I think that all the events that you've talked about kind of shows the value of radio as being one of the first mediums to kind of announce events, like you said, JFK getting shot and 9/11 and MLK dying.
Yeah.
All those somber events, and being the one to kind of announce to people and being the first voice that they hear say that is kind of I find it interesting.
Well, yeah, and you also have to kind of be careful about what you say on the air and what songs you play.
Right.
And I was sitting out there with a very limited song list because all we had with us was about 55 songs.
Oh, wow.
That was total that we had out there in the booth because we carried the top 40 and about 15 up-and-comers and a couple of oldies. But that was just about it. So, I had to carefully wade through what I was playing. requests just died out, because I mean, that was a big request show. I would get more requests than I'd play songs of my own. But for those 2 hours that were left in the show, it was nothing but me picking out songs, trying not to trip over something that might be a little bit agitating, if you want to use that
kind of
term.
sensitive.
Yeah. But then again, the city police, they were aware of the situation, and they would send somebody by every 5 minutes or so to make sure that everything was cool where I was. So, I was glad to have them looking out after me with all that going on.
Yeah. So kind of on the same-ish topic of like your years in radio, what are some trends that you've noticed as your time as a DJ? Kind of like, because you've been through so many different stations, I'm sure that you've kind of seen ways that different DJs interact with each other, or like broadcasting trends.
The biggest trend, and to me the saddest trend in radio, has been when in the 80s radio became commoditized, and that is, people began trading radio stations, buying up radio stations as if they were commodities, and trying to make money off of the sale of the radio stations rather than what the radio stations were actually doing revenue-wise.
Right.
And this, right after that, I think it was, I can't remember what year it was, but we also had radio deregulations. Prior to that time, you could own no more than 3 radio stations in a city. But at that point, that got raised to like 15, and then the cap was taken off entirely, and that gave rise to what we call corporate radio in the business. And now, instead of having individual mom and pop radio stations, you have clusters of radios owned by big corporations that, for the most part, programmed and operated in some place other than the city of their location. So that's the biggest trend. And so what happened is we went from live local radio with live DJs doing their trade. And unfortunately, we had this thing called automation roll in. And the DJs gave way to automation because it was cheaper to run automation than it was to hire DJs and have them run live shows. Deregulation also removed the requirements for reading the transmitter readings every half hour. And eventually it got to an hour and 3 hours and none at all, like we have today. We don't read our transmitters at all today because they're all run by computers, automatic. So to me, that's sort of the saddest thing that we've had happen during my time in radio. In terms of trends with music, the other things, this is kind of an interesting thing to me, because to me, when I first got into radio, it was the heyday of the disc jockey-driven radio station. What you had was live DJs spinning records and interjecting their personalities, lots of production elements, and lots of energy. It was a high energy thing. It was a very physical thing to be doing, because you had to queue up, play records. You had to load cart machines. You guys probably don't even know what cart machines are. Believe it or not, WUSC-FM has the only cart machine in active service in the city.
Really?
It's in your production room. Yeah.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. It's right to the left of the console or board, just above the auxiliary console that's sitting on the desk. So,
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And there's carts over in the rack on the other side. So that's the other thing you need. And a cart looks a lot like an 8-track tape, except it's only got 1 track of audio and another track of cue tones that tells the cart when to stop and start. So,
Gotcha.
But anyhow, so it was a very active physical thing. You were up and down. You weren't sitting in the chair the whole time. And that created a whole bunch of energy, I think, for radio. Eventually, with automation, we began to run into things called stop sets. And that's what the formatting that basically WSC is running now. You have 2 or 3 songs you play, and then you stop and you make an outro, and then an intro, a back sale, and then you front sell the records coming in. Well, that's typical of most radio today that has any kind of live DJs. But it's very untypical for what we did back in the day. And that's what my WSC-FM show, the Backbeat Show, is all about, is bringing back not only the music, but also the style of radio we had back then. You've noticed when I'm on the air, I'm playing jingles, I'm playing promos and stingers and all this kind of stuff. I do the weather every half hour.
Oh, cool.
Just the way it used to be. I say, this is what the weather is. Right now, during the pandemic, I'm also following the weather the next break with another announcement about the current pandemic situation from the COVID, national state of South Carolina. And I'm also doing the the board, what do they call that thing over at USC?
The COVID dashboard.
The COVID dashboard. I also use the COVID dashboard. So I kind of bringing WSC out back out to the world, and the universities out kind of back out to the world. Sometimes, if there's something very interesting in the Daily Gamecock, I'll read a story from the Daily Gamecock to kind of let people around know what's going on the campus. Because if you're not on campus, you really don't know what's going on in the university in many, many ways.
Right. Definitely.
And that's one of the things I was really miss about being with you guys, being embedded with you guys, because I mean, that was so cool. Just, being on campus, walking across the same place I've been walking over 50 years.
Right.
That's just so much fun for me.
Yeah. Well, we miss you a lot in the station.
Yeah, we miss you guys too.
We can't wait for all the alumni to come back, honestly. Like,
oh yeah.
I know that's been being pushed for.
Yep.
So you kind of talked about how you did the radio show with the guy, I forgot his name, the guy from the band.
Sam the Sham?
Yeah. So who other like famous people or cool people have you met through radio?
I once met Wolfman Jack, the DJ that was featured in American Graffiti.
Yeah.
Yeah. We met in an airport. I was in New York City on a business trip, and I ran into the airport, and we talked. He was really a kind of a cool guy. He passed away in 1995. So I was up there for, I forget why I was up there, but I was up there for some reason. And we got to talking about radio, and he told me he had just written a book called Have Mercy. And by the way, if you want to read an interesting book about radio in those days, I recommend that.
All right.
You're not going to believe this, but his real name is Bob Smith, or was Bob Smith.
Wow.
He was born in Harlem, and he grew up in Harlem, and then he got his first radio job in Virginia Beach. He was also on the air on a station he owned a station. He wasn't on the air at the time, but a station in Mexico, 100,000 watt station in Mexico, which was more powerful than any station in the United States at the time.
Yeah.
When it got raided by banditos, and they were riding around the station like cowboys and Indians and shooting up the station. It was kind of a wild day. That was in the, I think, late 70s that happened. I met Adrian Cronauer, who, of course, is the Good Morning Vietnam real guy.
Right.
That Robin Williams' character was modeled after. And Adrian could really ad-lib almost as good as Robin Williams could.
Wow.
And I told him that at WSC we had gone on the air and started doing rock over there. And I said, fortunately, Adrian, we stole your show name. He looked at me and laughed and said, you and half of North America stole my show name. So he's pretty cool about it.
Yeah.
Adrian, unfortunately, has since passed also.
Yeah.
So, and of course, I know almost everybody in broadcasting in Columbia, through my long association with the business. Right. There is an interesting group we have called the Slobs, the slightly legendary old broadcasters. People like Joe Pinner and Jim Gandy and all the other broadcasters from back in the day are all members of this. Unfortunately, we're not meeting during COVID-19, but we were meeting the first Thursday of every month at the Shoney's out here on Garners Ferry Road.
Gotcha.
But and I keep up with those guys via Facebook and emails and phone calls and stuff. Right.
So you said that you're kind of not meeting with them because of COVID. So how has like COVID affected your radio career? And then what are you doing to kind of combat not doing anything? Well, of course, the first thing I did was move my WSC show over to Our Generation Radio. And I did that with an idea of keeping the audience engaged, because that audience was used to having that show at that time. It's been there for 10 years. Right. Before this happened. It was 10 full years. We were beginning our 11th year of being on the air in that time slot when all this happened, and we had to give up our presence on 90.5. So I moved it over to Our Generation Radio. One unfortunate thing about that is my audience is older, and most of them don't tend to think of a computer or the internet as a source of entertainment. So a lot of my audience has not come over there to Our Generation Radio, but I'm going to continue to be over there until something gets worked out with and we can get back on the air on 90.5. Right. So the other thing is taking this gig on this radio station out in Oregon. On the afternoon drive out there, as a matter of fact, I was recording voice tracks before we had this call, and I got one more hour of voice tracks to do afterwards. Wow.
And then the show will air between 7 and 9 our time. It's 4 to 6 Pacific time out there. So that was the other thing that I did. So I've concentrated on just trying to keep the online radio going. And I'm also on some other stations. I'm on another station up in New Jersey, and two stations in the United Kingdom, and one station in Poprad, Slovakia, that is run by the British government for English-speaking expats across Northern Europe.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, I do not understand one word of Slovak, so I do the show in English.
Go ahead.
Fortunately, everybody over there speaks English.
Right.
You know, so.
For those shows, do you pre-record and then kind of like send it over to them to broadcast it, or do you broadcast it live from your setup?
It depends on the time of day. All my shows on WSC on Our Generation Radio are live. I have 3 shows. I have the Monday morning show, the WSC show. I have my regularly scheduled show Monday evenings, and then I have a Saturday morning show from 10 until 1. Those are all live. The shows on the other stations right now, I used to do some live shows over there, but right now, because of the time zone differences, I mean, there's a 6-hour difference between me and, say, Poprad, Slovakia, where that station is. Right. My show runs from 10 to noon on Sunday mornings over there. Well, that's 4 to 6 o'clock. I'm not going to get up and do a live show at 4 o'clock in the morning for nobody. So it depends on where the thing is. And of course, the beauty of this thing is the ability to do a show across the web into a radio station.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So, but the radio station has to have the capability to support that. And unfortunately, right now, WSC doesn't, or I'd be doing my show live over there from my home studios here in Southeast Columbia.
Right. Yeah. COVID's kind of threw a wrench in all of WSC's.
Oh, yeah.
Again, we miss the alumni so much.
Yeah. We miss you guys too.
Yeah, I wish that we didn't have to like be in automation throughout the night, because I don't know, my first semester as a DJ, I had a 6 to 8 a.m. show, and so like just being in the station that early is just really fun, I think.
Yeah, you kind of, when I was doing shows up there, and I would be on during the semester breaks and during the Christmas vacation and all that kind of stuff. Well, let me tell you, Christmas vacation time, I'd be the only one in Russell House. Yeah. And you have no idea how spooky Russell House is if you're all alone in there. It creaks and groans and makes all kinds of noises.
Yeah, because you're so used to like so many people being there all the time, especially like before COVID. Because I know that a lot of people just have classes online. All of my classes are online. I only go on campus for my show. But yeah, that must be very just like weird to experience that in Erie. So we talked a little bit about how you broadcast from your home, and you have your own radio equipment in your house, obviously. Can you kind of describe it and how it works a little bit?
I can. I'll give you a description right now, and then I'll show you later, because if I move my camera, I may lose it. I don't want to do that right this second, while we're doing the interview.
Right.
So we'll tack that on the very end if we're still live. Okay. I have bought a audio board from Audio Arts Engineering. Does that name sound familiar to you?
Is that the one that we have? Do we have?
Yes. Okay, yeah. It's the same manufacturer.
Okay, cool.
And my board is a baby brother to your board.
All right, cool.
And you got the D75. I have a thing called an Air 1. And the Air 1 is an 8-input board. We have 16 over at WSC, but I have 8 inputs. And we can do the mix minus thing and all that kind of stuff. It's got 2 channels instead of the 4 you have over there. But in essence, it works the same way. It's the same manufacturer, same design and everything. Nice. As a matter of fact, you're listening to me through that board right now, because I'm using my broadcast hookup to do that.
Yeah.
One of the other things I have, and I'm going to slip it on for a second, is the automation and the reverb. And we do that. I do the reverb thing because that's the way radio was. A lot of 60s radio had reverb on the DJs, and we used to use that as a function. If we ever figure out how to do the show from here on WSC, I'll have reverb, or shall we say reverb, on WSC as well. So you might look at the microphone and say, that looks a little bit familiar, but not exactly like the one we have in the studio. This is a Electro Voice RE27. It is the grandson of the RE20s that we have in the studio. So it's basically the same thing. And since I'm alone over here, I do have a windshield on mine.
Right.
We don't have the windshields on right now at WSC because of the COVID-19 crisis.
Yep. We have a lot of practices in place because of COVID, cleaning and stuff.
Yeah. I hope that board is clean now, by the way.
Oh my God,
been cleaning
it better be. We clean it every show, before every show. Like,
every now and then, every now and then I sit there and do my show and break out my Lysol and clean the board.
Yeah, I don't think that it's been cleaned this much ever.
Yeah. Well, that's not a bad thing. John George would be very happy.
Yes. So this is my last question. So since it's World College Radio Day, we're kind of like, we're doing this interview for it, just talking about how, like, your experience in radio. So can you tell listeners what radio and WSC specifically means to you?
Well, of course, the obvious, radio in general it's just been my career, or most of my career. I've done some work in IT and engineering, but most of my career was doing broadcasting or radio. And about, I would say 60% of the broadcasting I've done was radio. The other 40% was television, including some national network television that I did for PBS, ABC, NBC, and CBS over the years.
Okay.
So we were part of a pickup crew here in Columbia. The thing about college radio in particular, back in my day, college radio was basically the way DJs were trained. Kids would be in high school, they'd get into college, they'd find the radio station, they'd come into college radio, and they would learn the skills of being a DJ. And of course, back then, of course, it was a lot more physical than it is today.
Right.
We learned how to cue records, we had to cue tapes. As a matter of fact, WSC didn't even have a cartridge tape when I went on the air, where you just had 2 Ampex reel-to-reel machines in the master control room. So anything we did commercial-wise, and by the way, we were a commercial station.
Wow.
A lot of people. My sponsor was Coca-Cola.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that, because right now, like, we're nonprofit now, so
yeah, that's right.
We don't really have commercials.
When we went to FM, we had to drop the commercial.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
Because we went into the nonprofit or the educational band on the FM dial.
Okay.
So, but anyhow, so it trained me, and there's probably about 2 or 3 dozen ex-WSC DJs wound up working in radio in South Carolina, all over the state. Greenville, Charleston, here, Columbia, Orangeburg, Sumter. We had DJs from WSC on all stations, or a good bit of the stations around the state. So that's the other half of it. You know, one of our mottos, we educate the audience and we educate the DJ. And that is so true. I do know, I'm going to throw a name out here of an alumnus of WSC that's still on the radio here in Columbia. Her name is Linda Nunez. Most people will remember her as Jody Page from WTCB. She was over there for many, many years and on several other stations. Jody Page was actually her DJ name at WSC, and she carried it over into her commercial career. But Linda is now doing the morning news over at South Carolina Public Radio, in between All Things Considered and all the other PBS stations shows that they have over there. So this is, I think, because of that, college radio creates a unique learning situation for people. The University of South Carolina does not have a broadcast radio curriculum. Something that Ted Riker and I have talked about. Ted is, of course, the dean of the College of Journalism. Yeah. And we joke about that back and forth. And I said, well, just send your students over to us. We'll train them for you.
Yeah, right now I'm a communications minor.
Oh, so Ted's one of your deans.
Yeah, kind of. That's the closest to radio. Curriculum.
Well, Ted is also in the Columbia Media Club with us. So he was on our board last year. And so next time you see Ted, tell him I said hi.
All right. I feel like kind of radio also with that, since like all those DJs were kind of trained together in WSC, and then they were kind of like dispersed throughout South Carolina or even further out, that kind of also creates like a network, because everybody kind of knows each other, like at the bigger stations. Do you kind of see those relationships?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not just, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I know almost everybody in the local community here in broadcasting, but it's also true of the state of South Carolina. The South Carolina Broadcasters Association, I go to their conferences, and you know, representing WSC, by the way, I go to the conferences, and I see people that were DJs with me at WSC. They're still on the other end of their careers, or nearing the end of their careers. You know, and I think of people like Hugh Munn, who was an adjunct professor at USC in the College of Journalism. He taught the what was it, crisis management class, is what he taught over there. But he was with me at WSC. He went on to WNOK at the same time I went to WCOS. We were actually competing against each other, and we remained friends all these years. And yeah, eventually, unfortunately, Hugh passed away a few years ago with cancer. One more kind of fun story for you here.
Okay.
Hugh and I were on, he was on NOK and I was on COS at the same time one Saturday afternoon. And we were both kind of bored out of our minds, you know. And I don't know who called the other, but one of us called the other. And we're talking between records and all this kind of stuff. One of us got this wild idea about playing the same song at the same time. And we started doing that. And the phones just lit up like crazy. What are you guys doing? Blah, 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 blah. You know, and it went on for, maybe 15 minutes. And my boss calls me up and says, I don't know what you and Munn are doing, but you're going to stop it right now.
Oh, that's really funny.
See, there's a old WSC buddy story for you.
Right. Yeah. That's great. I can't wait to like see all my friends from the radio and like.
Oh yeah. I am so ready for the next body meeting that I can go to.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm ready for the one next Thursday too. So.
Yeah. It's nice to see everybody, even if it's just over Zoom.
Amen. Amen. You know, and that gets to, I think, one of the most important things is the relationships that you build with your fellow DJs. And, you know, I am fortunate. I got relationships with DJs from WSC that go back over 10 years.
Right.
You know, and it's one of the things I think Claire DeLune also loves is that collegialism, if you want to use that word, that has been built up through the association, through the radio station.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Have you, I know that I said I already asked the last question, but this one just came. So do you kind of like, since you've like rejoined WSC, do you keep in contact with the like college student DJs too? That you kind of like come across? Okay.
Yeah. Well, like the relationship I have with you, right. You know. So, you know, that's a perfect example. That's one of the ones that build up, and I'm sure we're going to remain friends. Definitely. You know, even after you're out of WSC, maybe I'm gone too, but we don't know. You know. Yeah. So, yeah, that's very true. Those relationships stay together. There was a former manager, Kate, and I'm trying to remember her maiden name. She was a general manager. She started baking cakes and cookies for the bake sales.
Okay, cool.
Well, she now runs Fat Baby Baking Company that has a booth at most of the what is it? The Saturday sales on Main Street.
Soda City.
Soda City, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of her company?
Fat Baby Baking Company.
All right, I'm gonna write that down because I wanna.
Kate Wessinger is her name now, but you know, I still have a good relationship with her. We chat back and forth over Facebook from time to time, and you know, I'm always helping her promote her baked goods because I got to tell you, I sample those things in body meetings and bake sales. I love her cooking.
Oh, that's awesome. It's really cool that she like started her own like baking business, kind of stemming from that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the rest of my questions. Do you have anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. Just listen to college radio, and in particular, listen to WUSC-FM.
Yeah, definitely. So do you want to say again where you can listen to your show?
Yeah, it's ourgenerationradio.com. That's all one word, ourgenerationradio.com. And there's a player on the webpage you can listen to, and of course you can pick it up off of TuneIn as well. You can do a search on TuneIn for Our Generation Radio, just like you can WSC, and find me there as well.
Awesome. And that's on Mondays from 10 to 12?
10 to 12. And another shameless plug, from 7 till 9 o'clock, 7 to 10 o'clock, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evening, I'm the afternoon DJ on KLYC in McMinnville, Oregon. That's KLYC.us on the web. So if you want to listen to over there, you can do the same thing.
All right, cool. Well, it sounds like you're very busy with all of your radio shows.
It's been the one thing that's kept me from going absolutely bonkers in this isolation.
I bet, yeah, it definitely kind of keeps you involved with radio, which seems like one of your true loves in life.
It is.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. If anybody wants to listen to Rick's show, he said how to do it. So we hope that you can come back into the station and do your regular show on the station because, like I said, we miss you.
The one thing I want to say about my show as a reminder is that you, Aaron, post my weekly reminder to the show every Sunday evening on the WUSC-FM Facebook page. So if you want to find out how to get to my show, you can get it that way too.
Yes, and those are posted every Sunday on any of our social medias. So you can find that information there. Thank you again, Rick.
And I'm eternally grateful for that, by the way.
No problem. Well, this has been the interview with Rick Wrigley for World College Radio Day. So we'll get back to my regular show.